All right. Today I'm speaking with Timothy Reigle. And Timothy, you're the founder of a ministry that helps men transform their lives. And I am really excited to speak with you. You're also the author of Living Porn Free, 10 Steps to Recovery, Redemption, and Renewal. And you work as a coach around helping people give up porn and other things. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about your background and how you came to do this work. And would you mind just starting with that?
Certainly, certainly. Well, it was never a plan that I had ever had in mind for how my life would play out or what I would be doing for any sort of ministry or career or anything like that, certainly. So, but it came out of my own struggles and my own battle with porn and sexual addiction, which going back started as just kind of a curious teenager. I grew up in a happy, healthy home. My dad was a pastor, and I had a good childhood, but I was a curious kid, and it was especially growing up in a church. It was kind of like one of those things you don't do. It's like a the forbidden fruit type of thing. Well, by the time you're a curious teenager, those are the things you look for, right?
Yeah.
And I discovered it, and I was like, "This is great. This is exciting. It's entered uh, the forbidden fruit, and it feels great, and
Mm-hmm.
all those things." And I was hooked right away. And so as I got older, got worse as I got older, and was in sexual relationships and things like that, and continued to escalate in both frequency as well as in the content. So it
Mm-hmm.
escalated as in got into deeper, more hardcore type of things. And eventually, into, webcams and chat rooms and all those type of things too. I got married pretty young. I was 21 when I was married and kind of thought that would solve all these problems. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, it was the opposite. It got worse. So I continued on. The first 10 years of my marriage were a constant battle. And it wasn't just porn. It made the jump into physical things where I had affairs and hookups and,
Mm-hmm.
was unfaithful to my wife. And that continued on and off for like I said, about 10 years. There were times where I would do okay and be away from it for a time, but I always went back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get caught, and I'd do all the right things, say all the right things, do fine for a while, but I always eventually kind of slipped back into it. And I did all the things you're supposed to do. I went to counseling, I talked to my pastor, I read all the books, I went to seminar, I did all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it would work for a while, but never got over it. And um, the last time it was, the last time I got caught was a real wake up call for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a couple of my friends actually who caught me, not my wife. And for some reason, that was the wake up call that spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why now, but I'm glad it did. But I don't quite understand that. But then I got serious help,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a man who came alongside to me and mentored me, and he helped me understand that I wasn't just some terrible person or some horny pervert or whatever, that helped me understand that why I was addicted, that I was using this to escape, using this to cover up some wound in my past, and help me figure those things out, while at the same time giving me tools to do it, to
Mm-hmm.
practical tools to help. Because so many of the other things just focus on either just bad habits or just try harder, just pull yourself up at the bootstraps and try harder, or in some cases even just pray harder. So it took all those things coming together to help me find a recovery from that. And praise the Lord, my wife and I ended up we never divorced, and we renewed our wedding vows on our 10th anniversary. And but even then, it was like, okay, well, I fixed this. That's all right. I'll just move on with my life. But like he often does, got other plans for me and put me in situations where I was able to mentor some other young men through my church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the coaching came about. I was able to mentor them, and I started writing and I started blogging and doing stuff on social media. And it just kind of, God just took it and just ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been coaching now one-on-one with guys for about Yeah, it'll be 4 years this year that I've been coaching guys one on one and felt, dozens and hundreds of guys throughout that time. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a unique road that led me
Mm-hmm.
to doing what I do.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you had quite the experience of being in the grips of something that you had trouble controlling.
Sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that's hard for so many people to understand. And that's why I can do what I do and the guys that I work with can trust me and because I've been there,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not just, a family member or something just telling them to get their act together or a pastor that just telling them to pray harder or
Mm-hmm.
somebody, I know what it feels like and it's hard to understand,
Mm-hmm.
especially a a wife or a partner that feels betrayed by this, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hard for them to understand that, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But for a man to know that he's not alone
Mm-hmm.
and that there's someone else who understands and wants to help him, that's huge.
Mm-hmm. When I read your story of your own life and how you came to do this work, it really it echoed my own experience, but from the wife's perspective. My
Mm,
ex-husband, I could have written something very similar to about his trajectory and his habits. And I felt for your wife, and I also was happy to hear that the two of you were able to stay connected throughout that because it takes a lot of
mhm.
work to overcome that kind of those challenges. And both of
Oh yeah,
you would have been in a really difficult position, her for the feelings of betrayal, but you, I can imagine, could have very easily gone into shame
hmm,
and denial. And so I could see that imploding lots of different ways. But I'm happy that the two of you were able to reconnect and make that work. And it gives us, it's a story of hope in
right.
in relationship. But one of the things that I'm also interested in is pornography has been something that I guess I guess it's a topic that I've found it's a difficult topic to talk about. And I've as as a woman, I've been concerned with it since I kind of encountered it, I guess. I
Hmm.
see the power that it has on men. And I I guess I had my natural feelings of betrayal and jealousy when a partner would use pornography. When I encountered it in my first marriage and my first husband was using porn, it really hurt me because it felt
Sure.
like a betrayal. It felt like non-monogamy. But when you try to speak up and voice that, you're kind of shushed. There's this cool girl mentality that good wives let their husbands do this and they see that it's not really a threat and you're supposed to permit this. And I guess as I've gotten older and gone through my life, I'm not as worried about not being the cool girl. I actually think that there's a lot of harm done to the ability for couples to connect. And I think it goes beyond just the wife needing to or the girlfriend needing to suppress her jealousy. I think it actually hurts connection. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that from your perspective as somebody who's been down that road. Do you feel like it was actually hurting your ability to connect to your relationship?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of both sides of what you described,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't see it as a betrayal. And what I
Okay.
mean by that, I knew it was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't doing it to betray her. I wasn't doing it because I was getting something out of that I wasn't getting from her.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing it to hurt her. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I totally understand how she feels that way and
Mm-hmm.
why she does and is 100% valid, those feelings. Um, but at the same time, yeah, it is damaging, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. Does it fall to the level of adultery? I don't believe that it does, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still a betrayal. It still is damaging.
Mm-hmm.
Now I did go to the level of adultery, but um, so a woman's feelings of betrayal there are certainly valid,
Mm-hmm.
but it is understanding why a guy goes there is very different. He doesn't go
Mm-hmm.
there to betray her or anything like that. I knew what I was doing was wrong the entire time. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that it was hurting her. I knew it wasn't right. I was convicted of that and felt the shame of that
Mm-hmm.
the all the years I was addicted to it. So it's kind of both sides. There is that betrayal and that feeling of
Hmm.
hurt, but there's also the need to understand that he's not doing this to hurt you. He's doing this because this is how he learned to cope
Right.
with sort of things. And it's taking one of the reasons porn is so dangerous is because it takes the most basic human instinct,
Hmm.
especially for men and
Hmm.
visually oriented men, and puts it in a easily accessible package,
Right.
right? So man's basic instinct is to, besides obviously hunger and survival, is to procreate.
Hmm.
So it takes something that God created to be good, to seek out a woman, to have children, to do those things, and short circuits it.
Hmm.
And so all those feelings of a woman's betrayal that would be tied to that natural, healthy, what sex was intended to be. So she feels all those feelings while he feels that he's just escaping. And
Hmm.
so there's that dichotomy there of where there's both sides of it,
Hmm.
and it just wreaks havoc all the way around, and it absolutely causes a disconnection, because it first of all, you're not fully present when you do have sex with your spouse, and a lot of men get to the point where they become so attached to porn that they can't even achieve erection,
Hmm.
or maintain it throughout that. So there's a natural thing there. One thing I say all the time is that, sexless marriages don't cause porn addiction. Porn addiction causes sexless marriages.
Yeah.
A lot of guys give me the excuse, well, my wife doesn't want to have sex, so I go to porn, which I think is BS 95% of the time, right? Um, usually if she doesn't want to have sex with him, it's because he's doing that or because of some other reason that he's not being the husband he should be.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so then it causes further, where guys prefer porn and they prefer those sort of things. And so, yeah, it absolutely, it's short circuiting the natural system of sex and intimacy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'd love to hear more of your perspective on that. I feel like it's the silent epidemic in
Hmm.
relationships.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you say about the two sides of that, or the two perspectives in that. I think it's really easy to make a anti-porn argument from a female perspective,
Sure.
and it's more, I think, more important to hear it from a male perspective because it's men that would be convinced by this. Men need to, if there's anything to be done with tempering our society's appetite for pornography, it's going to come from the people who are consuming most of it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a conscious choice made by people who would be the target consumers. And it's not to say that women don't consume porn. Lots of women do. But it's a male dominated
Sure.
product.
Yeah, absolutely is. And so men have to realize the damage it's doing, and most men do.
Mm-hmm.
They may not admit it
You
or
think
may not
you
want
think
to
that
admit
they
it.
do know that that's a
I think
problem.
so. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. There's guys that are in denial, but um, and there's people who try to justify it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think deep down, every man knows that it's wrong, and that's not just from I teach from a Christian perspective, and it's not just a prudish Christian thing either, right? It's not just a bunch of Puritan Christians, judging everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is obviously it becomes an addiction. There are physical consequences. We talked about the erectile dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
thing. It destroys your testosterone levels. It causes all this shame, this guilt, all the time that goes into it,
Mm-hmm.
and none of that speaks to the damage it does to relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And men know that deep down, but they struggle to quit it
Mm-hmm.
because it's become so addictive. Almost every man I've worked with, and they come to me and they're like, they come to me because they're at their wits' end and they've
Mm-hmm.
tried to quit it and they've tried to do this all their time and they can't. They know it's wrong, but they can't defeat it. And so they come to me for help doing that. And so that I can give them those steps to do it because it's not something you can really do on your own. When it gets to that point to where it's an addiction and there's such an emotional escape part of
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that you can just, pull yourself up out of bootstraps and overcome with sheer willpower and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
There's elements of willpower that are needed, but you need to heal it from the inside out. And that's what I help guys do. And so, they know it's wrong. They just need help overcoming it.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a safe level of porn consumption, or is there a relationship that a man can have or a person can have with pornography that's not toxic?
I don't believe there is. I mean, people say that to me sometimes. They're like, "Well, I'm not hurting anybody." Well, you're hurting
Mm-hmm.
yourself, right? And you can get into the whole, sex trafficking side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which there's a lot of
Yeah,
reasons.
that's another
So
angle.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of things with that, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even if that just from you're just saying, "Hey, man, I'm just enjoying this. I'm just relaxing," those side of things, and what benefit comes from it?
Mm-hmm.
All you're doing is wasting time. You're killing your energy. Even if you're not married, like you're not doing anything here. You're just wasting away, and you're destroying any future aspects of marriage. Yeah, maybe you're not don't have a wife that you're harming with this, but you're setting yourself up for failure when you do have a wife. And I work with a lot of single guys too that are wanting to get married and wanted to have a long-term relationship. And they're like, I can't go into a relationship like this, and I don't even know how to, a lot of guys, I don't even know how to approach a woman in real life because all I've done is watch porn since I was 10 years old, and they have no idea how a real relationship works or what real sex is like
Mm-hmm.
or any of those things because they've just been so hooked and so had their brain and their worldview so distorted from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you were talking about how what you said this great phrase, you said dead bedrooms
Mhm.
don't cause porn addiction causes dead bedrooms or
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
something
yeah,
along those lines.
yeah.
And I have been really surprised. I'm just surprised and dismayed after the first time I um, had a discovery with my ex-husband. It was a discovery of all this, just tons of infidelity and porn related stuff. And it's like I said, it was similar to your bio that you've given. Um, I went on the internet. I found NoFap forum
Hmm.
and was reading on there and reading the stories of the men who were writing, but also there's spouses and partners kind of forums, and just this was just going on. I've read so many people telling stories that sounded like my own story, and then after that, in the subsequent years, so many women that I've spoken with have had a story about their husband who, yeah, we haven't had sex in a really long time. He's got a little problem. It's embarrassing for him. So we don't talk about it. And, and it's like and I've said, is porn an issue? And it's always, oh no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. He loves me. He wouldn't do that. He's got a problem. But it's over and over and over
Yeah.
that all these supposedly, healthy, young, under middle-aged men just can't have sex. And so their wives are just forgiving this. And I've heard this story repeatedly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think it's a porn epidemic.
Oh, I do. I do. Look at the commercials you see now on TV or internet or whatever for ED medication.
Mm.
When all that first came out 15, 20 years ago, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of medication, look, the age of the people in the commercials,
Mm-hmm.
right? They were the silver
Silver
foxes.
hair. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. And Hugh Hefner was in
Mm-hmm.
his whatever he was 70s at that time and was a huge advocate for it and all those
Oh.
sort of things. But look at the ads now. What are the age of the men in these ads you see? And you see them advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Hims, Roman, some of the other brands,
Mm-hmm.
they advertise in sports. They're advertising during football games and
Oh.
baseball games and things like that. They're marketing to men, young men. And the men in these commercials are in their 20s, 30s, kind of, I'm in
Mm-hmm.
my mid 30s. So they're kind of marketing to my generation.
Mm-hmm.
And the age of the guys in the commercial are my generation. Why is that? These guys in their 20s and 30s should have zero problem in the bedroom with maintaining an erection.
Right. If they're healthy, they shouldn't have
Right,
a
right.
problem with that.
Even young men in teens and early 20s that I've come across that struggle
Mm-hmm.
with this. I mean, it used to be the joke that a teenage boy, got hard over anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
was and now they can't. And that's all related to porn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of, I mean, I've done obviously scientific studies on it, but I don't know of any other thing that causing that. It's not a medical issue. There's nothing we changed or anything like that. There's not a disease that causes that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all related to their brains being so absorbed with porn and being so used to that that they
Mm-hmm.
can't achieve erection without it. Because what your brain does is it's like any other addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It needs the same amount of uh, the drug to get the same high, to get the same release, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like other addictions where you just drink more, you do more drugs or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You know,
Mm-hmm.
with this, you need more, you need different. It's always got to be more, 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 more.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain literally rewires itself to crave that. And if it doesn't get it, it can't respond to it. You know, an alcoholic that, used to get drunk off of 2 beers when they first started drinking now needs 15 to get drunk. Well, it's the same way with this. Now you've desensitized yourself so much that a real woman in front of you that wants to have sex with you, you can't, even if you want to, and you're willingly want to, you can't because you desensitized yourself so much to it by all the porn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's such a temptation. I mean, if you're a young man and you're not in a relationship, you have quite a hill to climb to conquer your fears of approaching a woman, conquer your
Mm-hmm.
fears of trying to be in a relationship with someone, not to mention the human awkwardness of the situation. There's often so much awkwardness, even in a marriage, that goes
Mm-hmm.
into trying to negotiate physical
Right.
relationships. And you can have that, or you can get married and have one woman that ages, that goes through moods, that has a child and then doesn't want to have sex for a month or
Right.
more, and all the challenges that go into having a
Exactly.
real human sexual relationship. Or you can open your screen and you can see endless beautiful young partners doing anything that you want to see at
Right.
any time on demand. It's what a temptation that is.
Yeah. Well, it has the reverse effect of what they intend. They're being like,
Mm.
oh, well, a guy who's not in a relationship, whatever, he can find a way to, get release or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they pitch it that way. But it actually works in the opposite way because then the man no longer has a desire to go out and pursue a real woman. Why would he need to? Right? He's got everything, like you just said, at his fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
There's no risk of rejection. There's no risk of getting turned down. That you don't have to do anything yourself. You don't have to risk failure. You don't have to be in shape or have attractive qualities and attractive personalities and things like that to actually attract someone.
Mm-hmm.
You can just dial it up at any time. That makes me sound a little
Yeah.
dial up, but you can just you can access it anytime, anywhere, without any of those other things that go along with it. And so it's instead of actually just giving a release for someone who can't, who's alone, it's keeping someone from alone from solving that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that goes to the emotional issues. A lot of guys go to porn because they had some sort of wound or some sort of emotional damage. So if
Mm-hmm.
they were rejected by a girl, I was. I mean, that's one of the things that I had to deal with. I was, rejected by this girl when I was in high school. Now that I'm in my late 30s, who cares, right? Who didn't get dumped in high school, right? But it left this scar on me about
Mm-hmm.
this being rejected. And so I had this fear of rejection. Porn's never going to tell you no. It's
Mm-hmm.
never going to reject you. It's safe. It's safe. You don't have to have the courage to
Mm-hmm.
approach someone in real life with that fear of rejection because it's
Mm-hmm.
never going to reject you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to deal with all those things of life that are just part of relationships and especially now we've created an environment where men don't feel like they can approach women in real life. For and some of that has been some negative, some of even the Me Too and the sexual harassment stuff, which is horrible stuff. But it's created this environment where a guy who even is well intentioned is scared to approach a woman for fear of all that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those things have had negative consequences, not intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
but it's created this environment where men don't feel like they can do that. There was that whole thing a few months back about um, catching guys checking girls out at the gym. Well, then girls were wondering why guys weren't approaching them at the gym. Well, they're afraid of getting labeled a creep.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if he can just go home and look at porn and jerk off on his iPhone and not have to deal with any of that or that fear
Hmm.
of rejection or being labeled a creep or Me Too'd or any of those
Hmm.
type of things,
Hmm.
yeah, that's all right there. And he can just access it any time and not have to worry about any of those things. But then he ends up alone and lonely and miserable, which
Hmm.
just exacerbates it and continues the cycle.
Hmm. Are there, do you feel like you've experienced rewards for giving it up? Because I think there's also not only the lonely man who
Mhm.
uses it to allay his fears of rejection or assuage his feelings of rejection, but also the man who's in a relationship but wants to have his cake and eat it too. I've got this, I have a wife and kids, but I just, I just have to get some release. So I'm just going to also use this.
Mhm.
So do you feel like giving it up has enriched your life in it?
It is certainly and it's enriched my life in multiple ways. Just me personally, I don't have this guilt and shame all the time. I'm not wasting the time doing it. I'm not having any of the physical effects. All those are long gone.
Mhm.
In my relationship, my marriage is a million times better because there's trust there. There's true intimate connection like we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
And our sex life now is better than it ever was. Because we're both, all the things we've gone through
Mhm.
and it'll be 16 years of marriage this summer would destroy most marriages.
Mhm.
And some marriages can't survive it, and that's okay. It's every marriage is unique, and we came out of it stronger because we eliminated all those things. And I was able to become the type of man and husband that I knew I couldn't and should be.
Mhm.
And she knew I could get there. And she was able to understand that this wasn't the real me, that I was struggling with this. And I did want to be the type of man that I was capable of being. And praise the Lord. And I'm thankful to her that she saw it in her heart to forgive me and keep doing that because now our marriage is amazing and our sex life is amazing. So
Mhm.
giving that up, if it had continued, our marriage probably wouldn't have survived. And only because I did were we able to heal those sort of things because there were other things in our marriage that we couldn't deal with until this was dealt with. And a lot of guys come to me and saying my marriage is going to be over. A lot of guys get a straight up ultimatum like
Mhm.
quit or else, right? And so a lot of guys come to me with that. And it's like, well, we got to fix this first. Like you can't even start working on fixing the problems in your marriage until you fix this first. You have to stop the bleeding here.
Mhm.
And then once you do that, then you can work on healing the other issues in your marriage so it can be as fulfilling as you want it to be. And I hope that my story gives people that hope,
Mhm.
that hey, this doesn't mean it's over. This doesn't mean that it's everything is destroyed and that trust once broken is never fixed. It's able to be healed. Not everyone can, but it is possible. But none of that is possible if you don't stop it
Mhm.
up front.
Mhm. You said something earlier about how you'd been caught by you were caught again by your wife. So it sounds like there were a couple of
Oh yeah.
different times. And then, but it was the final breaking point for you was when your friends were,
Mhm.
if confronting you with this. And
Yeah.
something I've wondered is there, I would imagine you say you're kind of living with this shame and guilt. You know that it's wrong. So your wife catching you is already on some level, it's calculated in. Like, this could
Sure.
happen. So, was there something special about the intervention of other men? And I'm asking this partly
Yeah.
because this was a sense that I had when I was going through this. I wished that we had like, I thought about what happened to community and having
Mm.
sort of bigger family connections where other men would get involved and maybe my father would be a part of this picture and his brother and other men to say, hey, you're hurting your family
Sure.
and kind of help lead him to a better way of doing this.
Yeah. For my situation, it was those friends were already aware of my struggles beforehand, and they
Okay.
had been kind of that community support and that accountability and stuff.
Okay.
They had tried to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up lying to them just like I lied to my wife and everybody else. And so
Mm-hmm.
that last time they caught me, they pretty much disowned me.
Okay.
And I haven't really spoken to them since. It's been
Oh,
six
wow.
years. And so that was some of the wake up call for me.
Okay. So it
But
was a real divorce in some ways,
oh
but
yeah,
from your
yeah,
friends.
yeah, it was a real consequence. I didn't lose my marriage, but I lost my best friends, right?
Yeah.
And but it's 100% true that you do need other men with you.
Hmm.
You need that accountability. You need that support. And now I'm part of several groups of men that I can go to, and we can talk about things that we struggle with, whether it's
Hmm.
this or
Hmm.
anything else that we can talk about and share those burdens with each other. And that's not happening amongst men.
Hmm.
There aren't places for men to come together and open up and be vulnerable and say, hey man, this is what I'm struggling with, because most guys are. And they
Hmm.
need that place to feel, I hate the term safe space, but they need, that place where men can come together,
Hmm.
where they can share their burdens, where they can be vulnerable and they can get help.
Hmm.
It's not a cry fest or anything like that. It's not gay to have another man's shoulder to cry on and be open and be vulnerable. Men need that, but there aren't opportunities for that. Most
Hmm.
men are afraid of that. And, it's come off that if you're too close with, there was a whole thing, it was a bromance and all these terms,
Yeah.
that are jokes and memes,
Yeah.
but it's true. Men don't
Yeah.
feel safe to go to another man and be like, hey man, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Can you be my accountability partner? They don't feel safe to do that. So in that way, that there is men who do have problems don't have a place to help, but then because they don't have that place, it exacerbates the problem.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and I can imagine relapse is really hard for people who are struggling with this because even alcohol requires a trip to the store.
Right.
But it's not a heroin. It's not these things that might be even might have to jump through the hoops or whatever you
Sure.
do. But even alcohol or cigarettes require a trip to the store, whereas
Sure.
porn is on the thing that you use to communicate to everybody. It's
Right.
right there on your phone or your computer or whatever. It's already in your hand.
Yeah.
So it must be incredibly difficult to give this up once it's become a habit.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's things that you can put in place to help that. I work with a group called Covenant Eyes, which is a blocking software. It's not the cure. It's not going to heal the problem, but it's a safety net, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and
Can you
that's one
put
of the
that on your
things that.
children's devices too?
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
can. Oh,
yeah, you can put that on
wow.
phones, laptops,
Uh-huh.
iPads, all types of things. And there's other ones too
It's
that
cool.
do something similar. And you know, you can get around them. They're not foolproof. They're
Hmm.
designed to be that guardrail, right? They're going to keep you from going off the cliff if you're driving how you're supposed to. But if you're going 100 miles in the wrong direction, they aren't going to help you, right? But it's a boundary, and
It,
that helps.
yeah, creates a hurdle.
Yeah, creates a hurdle, and that's what makes porn so terrible and so hard to defeat is because it's so accessible
Hmm.
and it can be hidden, right? Eventually, at some point, if you're a severe enough alcoholic, if you're a severe enough drug addict, you can't hide that, right? There's
Yeah.
going to be physical manifestations of that in
You're
your
going to smell
body,
like
or
it, or yeah,
right,
the
right,
health is going
or
to show. Yeah.
right. This you can hide for years
Mm-hmm.
without any outward sign of it. Your wife may notice something, like we said, like we talked about the bedroom type of thing, but for the most part, you can't look at one guy versus the other and tell,
Hmm.
like you can with a drug addict or something.
Hmm.
So it can be so completely hidden. Even porn itself, I'm 37, so I came when I was first starting to watch porn when I was a teenager was the cusp of the internet age,
Hmm.
and the late 90s, early 2000s.
Hmm.
Before that, you had to you did have to go somewhere, right? You
Hmm.
had to go behind that creepy curtain in the back corner of the video rental store, right? Which
Yeah.
which kids today don't even know anything about. I'm at least old enough to remember that. You know, Before then you had you know, 30, 40 years ago, you had the adult theater type of things, the creepy, store that, where you could go to buy stuff. Even then you had to, like you say, you had to go to the store like you do for alcohol or go to the gas station for cigarettes or whatever. So there was an element of it then. Now, not only is it completely accessible anywhere you go,
Hmm.
but we're also giving access. I mean, how young are kids getting cell phones now?
Really
You give a
young.
9 or 10-year-old an iPhone with full access to anything,
Yeah.
even if there are blockers on it, these kids can get around it,
Hmm.
and not expecting there to be problems. It's insane.
Hmm.
So it's so accessible, and it's even uh, pushed as being, there's a whole media thing and a whole society that is almost embracing it and saying this is
Yeah.
healthy for young kids to do and young men to do, and that should be encouraged. And that's just wreaking havoc on these young men, and even more increasingly as time goes on, young women too.
Hmm. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. I've heard the phrase porn literacy used.
Mm,
Like we're teaching this to kids. It's
right.
schools want to talk about pornography and how it can be incorporated into sexual identity
Yeah.
development and how it's healthy. And I spoke with a 16-year-old recently and asked about it, and the response I got was, "I'm 16. Of course, I look at porn."
Yeah.
And I'm kind of,
And that's
what
supposed
is
to
your,
be
yeah,
legal, right?
yeah,
Like,
right, yeah,
technically that's illegal.
right.
And
What, yeah, what are
yeah,
your thoughts on kids and porn and
I think it's
education?
I think it's child grooming, honestly.
Mhm.
I think it's the worst possible thing we can do is to do that.
Mhm.
I think we should talk to kids about it, certainly. I
Mhm.
mean, because if parents aren't talking to their kids, they're going to know about it. And that's something I run into a lot. And people ask me, well, when should I talk to my kids about porn? Well, whenever you think it's time, do it a couple of years before then, because
Mm.
I guarantee your kids have seen it, you know?
Yeah, so I want to ask you about this. And
Yeah.
you're a father,
Hmm.
and how old are your kids?
They're teenagers. They're 14 and
Okay.
18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have younger kids. They're, well, 12 and 10. They're just a little bit
Yeah.
younger. And then I have grown kids. But
Hmm.
for my younger kids, this is an issue that it's very important. I want to talk to them about it, but I want to find the time when I don't want to destroy their innocence with information. And I
Sure.
don't want to, but it's kind of like finding the sweet spot. You have to
Yeah.
find the point when they're ready to hear this, when it's not going to shatter something for them, but
Right.
also before they've been exposed to it. And
Right.
so, we don't do
Yeah.
screens very much in our home. They don't have access to I am not under the illusion that they don't see things that I don't know about, because I know that the internet is,
Right.
who knows, when they're with a friend or whatever, there could be slips, but I don't believe that they've been consuming any of this at this point. So this seems like a
Sure.
good time to talk about this. And yet I I don't want to present them with a whole lot of thought changing information that sets
Mm.
them off in this way. So, for someone like me, what do you suggest? How do you suggest that a parent talk to their kids, and when?
Well, I think it's a lot of knowing your kids,
Mm-hmm.
and no one knows your kids better than you, and knowing when that appropriate time is. But yeah, you have to find that sweet spot and not wait.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have to go into graphic, gory detail with a lot of things, but just
Yeah.
say, you know, I mean, just as simple as having the birds and the bees type of talk, and just
Mm-hmm.
saying, there are other things out there that try to short circuit this.
Mm-hmm.
One mistake I think a lot of people make, and a lot of specifically Christians make, is pushing the belief onto kids that sex is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's well intentioned, right? I mean, we all want our kids to be abstinent, right? I mean, nobody wants, I have teenagers. I am not ready to be a grandfather, right? But it's well intentioned, but it can do more damage than good. I grew up, in the 90s and early 2000s. There was a lot of purity culture stuff, the promise rings and all
Mm-hmm.
that type of stuff, which again was well intentioned. We should be teaching that.
Mm-hmm.
But it created this thing: sex is bad, don't do it. Porn is bad, don't do it. All these things are bad. Don't do them.
Mm-hmm.
When what we should be teaching them is like, no, sex is a good thing. It's a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
God created it. It's a great thing, but it's designed for people who are married. It's designed to bring them together and to create families and to do that. It's not designed for kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there that distort that. And there are people who take something that is good and healthy and something that everybody wants and something can be satisfying pleasurably and tries to short circuit that. So a lot of it comes down to that teaching that delayed gratification versus instant gratification,
Mhm.
which is a whole other thing that's completely distorted amongst our society now, even separate from sexual issues. And teaching them that, hey, this is a good thing. But if it's not respected and if you try to short circuit it or do it in a wrong way, there's a lot of negative consequences. You know, driving a car is a great thing. But if you do it too young, you do it in the wrong way, it's going to have disastrous consequences.
Mhm.
So you have to teach people to respect that and to learn to do it in the proper way so that you can reap the benefits of it.
So it's not a porn is bad or sex is bad. It's not
Right.
a sex is good, so be hedonistic with it and do it as much as
Right.
you can. But it's a sex
Right.
is special.
Correct.
And yeah, that seems like I with a lot of these bigger social conversations, I keep coming back to the thought of Aristotle's virtues
Hmm.
being the sort of the balance between the dearth of something and the excess of that thing.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's going back to teaching discipline and virtuous behavior.
Yeah. Sex has become so casual,
Yeah.
and sex is the least casual thing in existence,
Mm.
right? It used to be, you were thought to be scandalous if you kissed on the first date. Now with Tinder and all these apps and everything, it's not whether you kiss on the first date, it's whether you have sex on the first date. Or even if you have a date to begin with, you just go right to it. And
Hmm.
so it's just taken all those things down and so minimized it to just be a physical act, which obviously it is,
Hmm.
but it's not. And so you see all these people who are end up broken from that, especially
Hmm.
women,
Hmm.
from the casual sex. Because for women, there's so much more emotion attached to it, so they end up emotionally broken, and men do too. They just don't realize it to an extent because they think it's manly to go out and bang as many women as you can. But in
Hmm.
the same way, eventually they get down to it, and I've worked with a lot of men like this. I've done all that. I've gone and hooked up with all the chicks and everything. It's like it's empty, right? They're like, sure, it was fun or whatever, and you got um, the notches on your bedpost type of thing, but in the end, they're like, I'd rather just have, I want to get married and have a family, and
Hmm.
they realize the emptiness of it eventually, but by that point, there's a whole lot of baggage and damage that's done along the way.
Well, I think that's a good point that you're making. And you use the phrase notches on your bedpost. And then
Mhm.
there's this discourse around body count when it comes to
Yep.
women. So the women have a body count, they have a burden and something that takes away from their specialness and their value to their partner if they have too many partners. And men and you mentioned that there is a weight that you carry from that and sort of a spiritual or psychological burden from it as
Mhm.
well. But what is that like? And did you have to work to forgive yourself
Oh, yeah.
or to come to terms with that history of yours? Or is it something that's easier to just put in the past?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's certainly a double standard there, just
Yeah.
in the culture, right?
Yeah.
Men, the amount of your body count is a badge of honor. With
Right.
women, it's a scarlet letter, right?
Hmm.
So, which is obviously a double standard. But I think for men, it may not be a scarlet letter, but eventually they realize that it's empty. You know,
Hmm.
and all the things I did, beyond the porn and the hookups and the affairs and everything that I had, it was empty,
Hmm.
and I was constantly searching for something. And that's some of what was behind my addiction is I was using it to cope. I was using it to search. I was searching for some type of, fulfillment or acceptance, or I was trying to fill whatever void I had in my life emotionally. I was trying to fill through that.
Hmm.
And it didn't matter how many people I slept with or hooked up with, it was never going to fill that. But it gave you that almost mirage that it would, oh, if I just do this, that'll be enough. If I can just hook up with that girl, it'll be enough. Or if I do this act or whatever, then I'll be satisfied. And it never is. And so I just was felt with that complete emptiness of it,
Hmm.
constantly chasing something. And to use a scriptural example in the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon talks about the mist or the vapor. Like you go to grasp it and all these things, and it just disappears and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what this was like for me. I was trying to find that, and I get there, and I was just left emptier than I ever was. Going from that into recovery and then looking back, certainly there was a lot of healing I had to do. There was a lot of shame that was
Mm-hmm.
involved with it. I had to learn how to process that shame in a healthy way and process all that pain to where it didn't drive me further into it, which it often
Mm-hmm.
does. There's like a vicious shame cycle, but learn to heal from that. You know, I say to my guys all the time, porn and sex addiction isn't something you quit, it's something you heal. And you have to heal it on the inside out and figure out what those emotional things are that are driving there. Why are you going to this? It's not just because you're horny or you're a pervert or you're any of those things. It's because you learned that this was a way that you could use to escape the stress of life, escape emotional wounds, escape trauma, whatever. This became your coping mechanism and your release, your safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to figure out what caused that and why it caused that and learn healthy ways to do that. And that's what I had to do. I had to go in and heal some of these emotional things to forgive myself. I've sought forgiveness from my wife. God forgave me. My friends, people that I've damaged have forgiven me. And we've been able to heal and move beyond that. But it takes a lot of deep work, and that's hard to do. And so now it's to the point where I still have to live with those consequences, right? I know I did all these things, and there's still shame attached to that. But I don't let that shame drive my behavior anymore because I've
Mm-hmm.
learned to deal with that in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Something that I've noticed as you speak about this, although you come from a Christian perspective, a lot of what you've shared is based on behavior
Hmm.
and based on experience, and it's less about morality and religion and more about health and
Hmm.
connection. So, how do
Yeah.
how do you conceptualize this? Do you conceptualize it primarily as a spiritual and moral issue, or more in terms of personal growth and health, or is it hard
Well,
to separate?
it is hard to separate. To me, they're all intertwined. I mean, basically because my faith is such a part of my life and always was. Even when I was doing this, I knew it was wrong. But I don't think that porn is bad just because Christians believe it to be a sin.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe I would be doing the exact same thing I'm doing even if I wasn't a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
because it has so many other effects on there. Like I said earlier, it's not just a prudish Christian thing that we're saying this is wrong. I believe it is wrong. I believe it. The Bible says it's a sin, and it's something we need to confess and ask for forgiveness for. But I work with a lot of guys who aren't Christian. I share my experience and how my faith helped me through this and gave me the strength and courage to come through it. But I work with a lot of guys who aren't Christian and they still see the need to do it. You mentioned the no fap movement. There's a lot of movements about it that are talking about how damaging this is and how bad it is, and none of those are Christian or religious movements.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it has and caused damages in all those areas. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yes, obviously I see it as a sin, so it's a religious issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a marriage issue. It's a emotional issue. It's a sexual issue. It's a physical issue. It causes problems in all these areas of life. And so it's not just one thing that I'm saying that's this. I believe it's morally wrong, but I believe it's wrong no matter what because
Mm-hmm.
of all those other areas that it causes damage to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that I've been asking as these conversations have continued, and so many are around gender and sexuality.
Mhm.
And we've just seen like the dialogue around polyamory
Mhm.
expanding. And so there's a lot of encouragement right now of sexual, I don't know, exploration,
Yeah.
where it seems like the only guiding moral principle is that of consent. And there's
Mhm.
nothing else. And I really, I I guess to me, it looks like we're in a post-religious society. I know that
Sure.
it's not the case for everyone. There's a lot of people who still are religious and still that use faith as a guiding principle in their life. But so the society that we're in more broadly is based on secular principles and
Mhm.
science, and so how do we conceptualize sexual morality in a post-religious society? is it necessary to bring religion into the conversation in order to create a cohesive concept of sexual morality that's actually healthy for people?
Well, without some sort of guidance, who defines what is moral, right? Without religion, how do we determine what is right and what is wrong? And you say, well, we just know certain things are right. We just know murder is bad. Well, why is murder bad? If we don't have any standard to go by, why is it bad?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so there has to be some sort of moral standard for us to follow,
Mm-hmm.
and religion provides that. Now, obviously, I don't think we need to, force everyone to be of a certain religion or anything like that. But at some point, those things are there because we know the damage that they cause when they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have laws? To protect people. To protect people's safety, to protect people's well-being. It's the same way with this. We have morals to protect against the consequences of not adhering to that, to protect people and to keep families and people and children safe. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's just not codified. Mm-hmm. Morals aren't codified, right? So, but we have to have some sort of standard, mm-hmm. or society completely falls apart. And so you can make all these arguments against religion. Okay, but then what's the standard? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we just keep degrading that and keep going further and further away from that in an effort to eliminate religion. But then where does the line stop? Mm-hmm. Now you're starting to see things where they're almost justifying pedophilia. Mm-hmm. It's a minor attracted person. It's a load of bullshit is what it is. And you don't need religion to tell you that that's bad. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have some type of standard, then there are no lines. What do you need? What defines what's good and bad? Nothing's good and bad. So just anything is okay. Mm-hmm. And that leads us down a really dark path. So there has to be some type of standard to measure ourselves against, whether that's a moral standard or a religious standard or whatever, but there has to be something or everything will just fall apart.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing I keep kind of coming back to. It seems like we're losing our way and it's really,
right. We're
seeing it. And kids don't even know if they're boys or girls. And there's something deeply sad about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I wonder, I recently read the book, Your Brain on Porn. Mm-hmm. And I found it to be really, really good. It was packed with studies and evidence. Yeah. And part of the reason I was interested in reading it is this same conversation that we've been having. I can tell you why I think porn is bad for women, and I can tell you why I think it's bad for relationships, but I want to know about why it's bad for men individually, because ultimately the argument that's going to lead to people putting it down is going to be one that they can see for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I read this and I liked it so much that I tried to contact the author. And he passed away. And
he passed away a couple of years ago.
Passed away a couple of years ago. Gary Wilson. When I found his website, and it's chock full of information about how the porn industry, he basically faced a lot of retaliation for talking about it, for talking about this issue. And I wonder, have you had that issue yourself? Have you faced any difficulty or any attempts to silence you on this?
Not directly. Gary Wilson was more public with it and did it from, Your Brain on Porn. He did from a much more scientific medical type of side, more of a clinical aspect of it, and tried to have studies to it. And of course, yeah, the porn industry is going to go after somebody like that because you're hurting their bottom dollar, right? So they're going to try to take that out. I haven't had anything directly. I've probably been shadow banned on social media and stuff. And I even, a lot of times, I'll try not to use the word porn or sex or things like that, because who knows what the algorithm is doing these days to do that sort of stuff. So, but I just get, honestly, I get trolled more than anything, than it's anything trying to silence me so much. I have OnlyFans girls. I don't even know if they're real. They're probably bots on Twitter or whatever, come and post porn on my page. on
Oh,
my Twitter feed, or
okay.
they'll comment underneath my posts or things like that. So I get
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Hmm.
You know, I get people that send nasty stuff to me and try to. But I'm genuine. I am who I am. I don't hide behind an anonymous account. I use my real name, my real picture.
Hmm.
I don't hide because is there a risk to that? Maybe,
Hmm.
but I'm open about this. I'm open about it with my family, my church, my community, my career. You know, I wrote a book and it's out there.
Hmm.
So you can't really dox me when when I'm open about it. And those things just prove to me that I'm doing the right thing.
Hmm.
The more haters you have usually means you're doing the right thing. And to me, it at this point, I don't get angry over it. I don't react to it. Honestly, it breaks my heart that these guys, it's one thing to struggle with the porn, but you got to be pretty messed up to defend porn on the internet to strangers. Like, especially guys who are just trying to help people,
Yeah.
and you got to be pretty messed up to, you know, troll people like that and try to damage them.
Yeah. I was surprised to hear that there was any kind of pushback from, you know, the industry, because it seems like, going back to what you said, when you're doing it, you know it's wrong.
Mhm.
And so it does seem like it's sort of at best a guilty pleasure,
Hmm.
that people are aware that they're doing they're so to have some kind of veneer of legitimacy to this whole enterprise. I didn't think that we were even going for that. I thought that
Yeah.
this was, kind of an open secret. So it surprises me that there would be a need for that kind of countermeasure. I can see, like, in
Yeah.
issues of legislation where people are pushing for the age verification legislation, I
Yeah.
can see that you'd have people on both sides of something like that, just because the industry would want to present a case.
Sure.
Not that I think that they'd be right to do so, but I can understand that's just how business
Well, yeah,
works.
yeah, it's their business. Yeah.
But it's another thing entirely to try to discredit people
Yeah.
who are talking about it in a just a rational, legitimate way to help other
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important to talk about around this topic?
Well, the main thing I always want to share with people and is that there is hope for it. To the men out there, you're not alone. Like there's millions and millions of other guys struggling with it, and unfortunately, probably more guys than aren't. And so get help. Have find a friend, find a coach like me or a mentor or a pastor, whoever. Don't try to fight this battle alone. You're not too far broken. You're not too far gone. You're not um, you're not unforgivable. You can find freedom. You can find recovery, and you can be free from this and live the life you want to. To the women and the wives out there, same thing. Know that there's hope. You know, and it's going to hurt, and I know it hurts, and I know there's that feeling of betrayal, um, but it is possible as well to fix it. It's not uh, unfixable or unable to heal. It's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of forgiveness, and learn to understand if your partner's suffering from this, learn to try to understand what they're going through. I know the first reaction is pain and betrayal and anger. Um, but at the same time, try to understand why they're doing this. Because, like I've said, a lot of men, it's a struggle for them and they know what's wrong and they want to get better and can't.
Mhm.
I'm always for encouraging trying to save marriages rather than split them up. And again, not all marriages can be saved, but take every opportunity you can and don't just give up, because there were many opportunities in my marriage where both of us could have given up.
Mhm.
And a lot of people told my wife she should have, and some still do. And we didn't. And I was able to heal, and we were able to heal our marriage. And now we have the most amazing marriage we've ever had in the 16 years we've been together. And so, my biggest message to both men and women is that there is hope, there is healing, and there is redemption from this.
I think that's a beautiful message. And at one point, I thought I would have that same story, and we had an 8 year period where I thought things were better. I thought there was recovery, and then another round of gruesome discoveries that went back a long ways, and it just we
Sure.
weren't one of those marriages that could survive this. And I
Yeah.
think that an important just piece of recognizing the difficulty that wives experience
Sure.
is the helplessness of that situation, because no matter how much you want to forgive it, you can't keep forgiving someone who won't stop
Yeah.
hurting you. And so it really is a case in which the partner who is doing this needs to take the lead.
Right. Yeah. You can't change somebody else, right?
Yeah.
You can't change someone else's behavior.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's important to understand there, to me, there's a struggle
Mm-hmm.
and there's defiance. And that really is what defines whether a marriage can be saved or not.
Mm-hmm.
If a man is struggling with this, that means there's part of him that knows this is wrong, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's one thing for a man who is actively trying to fix it and is struggling
Mm-hmm.
and wants to do the right thing, but
Yeah.
is still falling short, and a man who just is justifying and saying, you know what, I'm just going to do what I want.
Right.
And those are two very different things. And so that's, I think, the most important thing for wives and women to recognize is what is which side of that is your partner on.
Yeah.
Not that the one who's defiant can't be changed,
Mm-hmm.
but that to me is the biggest thing. A lot of women get upset even if the guy's struggling, but well, if he's struggling, he's fighting the battle. Some days you're going to lose the battle, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just, there's going to be ups and downs in this until you get
Mm-hmm.
there. And so understanding where they're at and whether it is a struggle and they're trying to do the right thing, trying to get better. I think that's what saved my marriage is that my wife saw that this was something I wanted to fix and I just couldn't because I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the understanding of how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And versus a man who doesn't see it as a problem and doesn't want to fix it. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Well, I have really enjoyed speaking with you about this. I think that you're doing important work, and I value your perspective. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about
Sure.
you?
Best way is probably on social media. On X, Twitter, and Instagram. It's just my name, Timothy Reigle. And my website as well is timothyreigle.com, where you can go to find out more about my one-on-one coaching. Find my book, Living Porn Free. You can find that on Amazon as well. But timothyreigle.com or Timothy Reigle on social media, and can reach out to me and for any help or any questions or anything I can help you with.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much. It's been a delight to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.